Hey everybody, it's Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doc. I'm here at the IBM booth at NRF. You know, I've been with IBM for a number of years, and I met Nancy, who is going to tell us all about AI and some of the myths and the realities of what we're hearing. So welcome. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I'm Nancy Greco. I've been in technology for over 40 years, and what's really exciting now is seeing AI mature into something called Gen AI. And I think, Bob, you're a little concerned about someone's just going to take control, wave a wand, and everything's going to happen.
That's what everybody at this show seems to be saying, like this AI is this genie that grants you wishes. And so Nancy took me aside and like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. So would you help us? What are the fundamental things we have to understand? First off, AI isn't really a thing, it's a tool.
You're absolutely right.
Or you could take us down your path, that would help.
So our approach is going to be real simple. It's a tool. It's not a magic wand. And you really have to think about how you're going to want to use it. And because the very first step you're going to take is figuring out what's your key ingredient to Gen AI. It's data. So what kind of data are you going to need to be able to produce a model that can give you the right results? So at IBM, our approach is we're going to build on the trust our clients have always had with us. So we're not going to go out and scrape the internet for whatever data we can find. We're going to be very methodical about the data we go after. We're going to cleanse that data because you don't want garbage in because you're going to get garbage out. So it's going to start with the data. Curate a really good data set. Make sure you trust that data set. And what do I mean by trust, right? If you don't balance your data set, you can get biased.
Well, you told me about that I think somebody used AI and the predicted basically came down, I think it was like a hiring tool or something, and it said, yes, you need to hire more white guys, and it's like, yeah, that's not good. But the reason is because the data, you fed it, right? Not you personally, but yeah. So what do you have to do?
You have to balance out your data set. So you have to really understand like what you're trying to do and make sure the data is going to really represent what you're going to be trying to do. Are you going to be asking about hiring? Are you going to be asking about credit scores? Really make sure it's not myopic.
And so we have that bucket of trust. We have the bucket that you've got your data. And then where does our good friend WatsonX come in?
So WatsonX is actually three components. So the first part, as I mentioned, was the data. Make sure you curate a really good data set. So that's WatsonX data. The next is to create a model on top of that data, or you can use other models. We call that Watson.ai. We create our own models, and we're very confident about the performance of our models. Why? Because we created the data set. Right, but you can use other AI models like Hugging Face, open source. But the only caution I'll say, you can use whatever model you want, but make sure you understand the exposure you have.
Oh, wait a minute. What is exposure? That sounds like risk. That sounds like something might happen.
It's absolutely risk. So you have to go into generative AI with a mindset of what are you trying to do and how do you want to minimize your risk. So when I talk about exposure, if you want to go out and use any LLM model to write an email to your friends or your colleagues, go ahead, that might be low risk, right? And if it says something really off the wall, which we call hallucinations, it's low risk. Your colleague's not going to
say, what the hell's going on with
Now,
this?
Your mom might say, what the heck was this email? But you don't want to use that model to blast a note out to your customers or stakeholders.
Why? Because it's all the same. We think of it's all good, right?
No.
Why isn't it all good? What can I mention?
Well, what if it accidentally reveals something to stakeholders you didn't want? Or what if it accidentally exposed something to your clients that you didn't want them to know either? So
and just to build on that, you gave me an example of bedwetting. If I just happen to allude to sheets that are against bedwetting, that the way I say it in an email could open me up for liability from somebody, right?
Well, it could. As everyone was seeing, the lawsuits that came out, unfortunately, with the ChatGPT data file. Now, if you had what Bob was talking about, something very specific, like, I have sheets that, could reduce any stains due to bedwetters. There's someone who wrote a book that's going to say bedwetting, and if you said it the wrong way, Sarah Silverman's going to realize you used her copyright protected data. So that's why when you build this data pile, what IBM's done is we really make sure you have the right to the data, because you want to prevent from getting sued, because it ruins your reputation, and God knows how much money it'll cost.
And you can't go back, which is also one of the things I liked about Watson. And we won't go too long on this, but the idea that you also build this predictive model and then you got to test it, right? Because there are iterations you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn it. It's going to have to learn, right?
You know, you bring up a very good point. People think with generative AI, the human's going to disappear from the loop. Our attitude in IBM, the human is never out of the loop. You're going to want the human there to say, hey, that doesn't sound right. We might have to retrain. They might have to screen the data, but it all comes down to what is the result you're trying to get, how much exposure you're going to have. And so it's about risk mitigation. And so the third leg of our WatsonX tool is called governance. Now, you're like, governance? Why can't I just use it? Well, governance is going to be talking to our enterprise clients as what are the guide rules? What are the guardrails and the rules, right? What risk are you willing to take? Who's going to give you the data? Who's going to cleanse the data? Whose model are you going to use? Or are you going to create your own? And then also, too, how are you going to monitor it? Let's face it, things are going to be changing. What data would you use? Where did it go? Are you getting the right results? Or is there any concerns? We call that lifecycle management. So our plan is we help reduce the risk as you start embracing, let's face it, the amazing capability we now have.
Well, that's what I end with, because if you were a product manufacturer in the old days,
I'm old.
a few years ago, and you carried black dresses, let's say, we would say, wow, we sold a lot of black dresses. We need to order more black dresses next year. Oh, great. What kind of black dresses? What's the length? What should it have been made of? What was the age of that person who really bought it? And when we had to mark it down, how long did that take? And by the way, where did we get that? Oh, and the sustainability aspect, what happened? Well, the whole point is that if you're watching this far, is you got to get your data, and you've got to think there's so many data points that I could capture at least now, maybe billions, which is what Watson can do. We can't even fathom all the pieces it puts together, but you got to get the data. So if you're watching this as a retailer, if you're making products, whatever it's going to be, you've got to go through and be thinking way out, future self, maybe 20 years from now, will it be important that I know it's her eye color? Oh, we don't need to know that. Absolutely, you don't need to know it today. But imagine this. Instead of getting an email from your favorite big retailer, hey, all of our leftover stuff is 20% off this week. Great. Oh, I get 3 of them. Great. What if in Nancy's mailbox it says, hey, Nancy, here are 3 spring looks that are going to look dynamite on you. And it knows exactly her fit, her size, knows the price point she'll be able to do, and maybe even put you into a virtual avatar. And suddenly you're like, wow, this thought for me and made me look better. And I think that's where we're all trying to go, right? It's trying to elevate everything we're doing.
Yeah. We want to really make sure as a consumer, your voice is heard and you get something you want, because that's when you're going to feel fabulous.
So the important thing to remember is that AI isn't a thing. It's not like a magic genie. There's a lot of parts that go underneath it. And you got some things to be aware of. And it's going to be all about the data. And we're going to talk to Paul here in a little bit, talk about data and the amount that's out there and what we can do with it. Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doc, out.